Rob and I met the day before the staff meeting when we started teaching at Westring High School in Port Elizabeth in January 1977. We were in the same lift club, eventually in the same church. We were in charge of the Students' Christian Association together. And towards the end of the year, it was apparent that God meant us for each other. We were married in June 1978. Virtually from day one of our working life, we have been a team together. What a privilege it has been to be on a team with Rob, to discover ever new complementarities. And once our pastoral ministry began, we worked from home until Rob was medically boarded at the end of 2010. Rob was a person in touch with his own humanity. He knew his shortcomings only too well, and therefore also had a grip on God's mercy, which made him an exceptionally merciful human being in all his dealings with people. Rob loved people. Every individual was important to him. He could feel their pain, their hurts, their joys, their loneliness, their need for affirmation and encouragement, their experiences sometimes of real rejection. And he would always ask God for wisdom and ways to respond to them. He believed in greeting everyone by name, and I mean everyone, including all the children and even relatives of people he knew. He worked very hard at that behind the scenes. Rob was very compassionate. He noticed the disadvantaged. Nobody was invisible to him. He waved a lot to people. One day he waved to some people at the side of the road. I asked him who they were, and he said, "Oh, those are the guys who fetch our rubbish every week." Everyone was important to him. He especially showed great warmth and love to children, and always made sure they were included and made to feel part of the church. And he had a great gift with children. He could connect with them on their level. Together we ran a junior youth group, which we called Frogs, Friends of God's Son. And here, Rob's creative genius came into play. He was an ideas person. One day I looked up his sleeve and said, "Where do you keep all these ideas?" The children would flock to line up to be part of the spontaneous plays he would put together to tell a story, which made the Bible come alive. He loved story. He had a vivid imagination and a wonderful sense of humor. He loved beauty and color and music, which fed into the artistic side of his being. He took every opportunity to enjoy watercolor painting once he was medically boarded, and loved to personally bless people with paintings he felt could be of personal meaning to them. He loved language, and to a lesser or greater extent, spent some time studying English, Afrikaans, French, Italian, and even some Icelandic and Japanese in his linguistics course at Rhodes. And he did his best to speak and understand isiZulu. Rob was a words person. He used words well. His letters have been masterpieces, and we have heard many a church visitor treasuring a letter he has handwritten to them and keeping it for years. He used to pop up with the most amazing spontaneous expressions from time to time. For example, calling our hot tap in the kitchen an emotional wreck because it kept going hot and then cold. Rob loved fun and adventure, go-kart racing when he was young, traveling, fishing on the wild coast, berg trips, camping, surfing, bodyboarding, body surfing, going on the highest chutes at Ushaka Marine World and Disney World's Typhoon Lagoon Water Park and the roller coaster Kraken at SeaWorld. He won the dad's skipping race at Ladsworth Primary 3 years in a row. He was such a caring, loving husband. He understood my love language and really laid down his life to serve me. In his last years, when he couldn't work, he would keep me going so I could. He was an involved dad and grandfather, as you will hear from the children's and grandchildren's tributes. He had no enemies. He gave others wings to fly. Other people have reminded me how he launched them into ministry and missions in different arenas. Years ago, when I thought about who I would marry one day, I prayed for a man who loved God, that was a non-negotiable, who knew how to love self-sacrificially, who could sing, and who loved young people. Rob, you have fulfilled all those admirably. I've loved watching you relate so amazingly with our children. You've been a wonderful dad. You never put the ministry before them. And I'm so proud of the way you have made such a difference in the lives of so many people. And in these last 12 years, borne your illness so very bravely and with such courage. Thank you for being my lifetime partner. I will never forget your smile.
Being Dad's youngest child has come with its advantages. I was able to spend a couple of years with Mom and Dad with undivided attention, while Rich was off in Durban doing his articles, Ali was in PE, and Heath was already married. Dad and I got to spend some very special time together in those few years. But if only I could relive those few years, I'd certainly better maximize my time with him. When Rich and I were just boys, probably around 9 and 7 years old, Dad gave each of us a tool set for Christmas. This wasn't just any tool set, though. Dad had taken 2 big boards of masonite and fitted nails and loops to the board so that we could hang each of our tools on the board. Each tool had its dedicated space, with the tool's shape outlined with permanent marker. Practically speaking, these tool sets were to enable us to start working better with our hands and learn how to start fixing things and being more creative. Metaphorically speaking, though, this was probably the time in our lives when Dad really started equipping us with the tools that we needed in life and to become men. Not only did Dad pray for each one of us by name on a daily basis, with our specific needs or challenges mentioned, but he would regularly check in with us and find out how things are going, and he would always know what was going on with us and where we might need some extra support. I'm sure my siblings might also mention this in their tributes to Dad, but Dad always taught us to be competitive against only ourselves, to always try and beat the James Bircher of yesterday. Dad always used to laugh and ask how our exams were going, because he was heavily invested in supporting me through my school, varsity, and board exam years. He was always there for me, always available for a cup of tea or a milky and frothy cup of Frisco coffee. While I've become somewhat of a coffee snob in my later years, I would do anything to be able to sit down and have another cup of that milky and frothy Frisco with Dad. Many might not know this about my dad, but he considered himself to be quite the inventor, although most of his ideas were stuck in the design phase. From briar goggles with a fan fixed to the top to keep smoke away from your face, to complicated pulley systems, or hands-free reading in bed. His most notable idea, though, was the beach shongololo, which was a form of floating pulley system to aid surfers and the likes get out to backline without having to swim or duck dive through the breakers. I wish I could find the drawings he had done, as it would bring back so many memories. Dad's mad scientist alter ego was confirmed later in life when he and Mum discovered a form of light therapy for his Parkinson's. This entailed a builder's hat with various spectrums of imported LED lights for ultra-high frequency light to stimulate parts of the brain that were said to be an effective treatment to alleviate some of the symptoms of Parkinson's. With much thanks to Mike and Di Fitzsimons for the generous use of their beach cottage down in Mzumbi for around the past 30 years to date, we have created countless memories there as a family, and it was honestly one of Dad's favorite places in the world. Right into his 60s, Dad would bring his bodyboard and his fins down to the beach, and we would ride waves into the shore together. We fished almost daily and often found ourselves in the middle of a chaotic shad run. We were never particularly well equipped for fishing back then, but nothing stopped us from catching a couple of fish and making battered shad for breakfast for the family. Dad led a very active lifestyle when we were down at Mzumbi. There would often be family boot camp sessions where we do sit-ups and push-ups and runs on the beach. Dad used to make us do these awful military push-ups, which I still can't stand doing to this day. I've never been a big reader, And Dad knew that, so he used to bribe me by offering me bar ones on my way home from Mzumbi if I'd finished a book during the holidays. Apparently, I still need to be bribed to read, but perhaps Dad's love for reading will wear off on me someday soon. Dad and I had one very strange thing in common: the love of weird sandwich combinations. To this day, I still regularly eat Bovril jam and cheese on toast, which most people can't stomach the idea of. One of Dad's classic sandwich options was a marmite and lettuce sandwich, and we'd usually have these as padkos on our way down to Mzumbi. I must admit that I haven't had one of those recently, but it might be time now to try that out again in his memory. His craziest sandwich ever was probably the marmalade, peanut butter, and cottage cheese. In recent years, with Dad's Parkinson's having progressed, one of his biggest fears was leaving Mom behind on Earth by herself. There was a song called Welcome Home by Michael W. Smith, which is a very difficult song for me to listen to, as this was a song that made Dad weep, as it reminded him that he would likely pass away before Mum, and he was worried about how life after his passing might be for Mum. Dad, I just want to say that you mustn't worry about Mom, please. We will look after her like you did and make new memories that we can all share together one day. Dad, you have taught me so much about how to be a good husband and father. I still have a lot to learn, but you were the very best example out there. You have taught me to be kind and how to treat my wife with love and respect. You have taught me about the 5 languages of love, and this has been so important in teaching me that everyone needs different types of love. My only hope is that I can be even half the father and husband that you were to us and Mum. Then I will have succeeded. Dad, I'm sure that a life lived like yours, your never-wavering faith despite your very difficult circumstances, has resulted in all of God's richest rewards for you in heaven, and so well deserved. Thank you for loving me so much. Thank you for treating Mel as your own daughter. You guys had a very special bond, and she loved you so much. Now go and make that beach shongololo. And perfect it so that one day when we meet again, we can ride waves together again. There's a photo of you when you and Mom were on honeymoon that I came across. It looks like a moment of true bliss, and I thought to myself that this is surely how your experience in heaven has been thus far. Your body and strength fully restored and just truly blissful. I love you, Rob, top dog, and you will be sorely missed by Mel and Million, Lexi, Rosie, Sienna, and me. Thanks.
Firstly, I just want to thank everyone for connecting in to participate in an unusual celebration of Dad's life after what has been a pretty unusual time this past year. Your outpouring of love and generosity shown to my mum and our family has been beyond comprehension, as has God's peace completely surrounded us all. Dad always says it was great to start off with a joke at the speaker's expense. So while compiling memories and content to share and being able to speak about Dad's life and record it on video, I've come to the determination that my face is better suited to radio than it is to YouTube. Dad was a very present father, largely doing his ministry work from home. Office meant that we got to see him growing up. He played a very active role in our upbringing, and being a father of 4 kids meant he was spread pretty thin, but he loved us all wholeheartedly and was able to make a special and unique connection with each of us. He still had capacity to care and love for others in their time of need, and never impacted our connection that we had with him. He loved being active and always showed a very great interest in any sport we were interested in. If he had skills in a particular sport, he would volunteer to coach us all and our friends. There were some fundamentals that I still remember him teaching me that I've taught to other kids when I've coached them. This has always been a great way for him to connect and spend time with us and our friends, and also to get to know their parents better, whilst watching our matches from the sidelines on the weekends. But now you've shifted from the sidelines to joining the great cloud of witnesses that have gone before us, cheering us on. as we fix our eyes on Jesus and continue to run the race marked out for us with perseverance. He nurtured our walk with Christ at every point, ensuring the church had a vibrant children's and youth ministry. Frogs, which was known as Friends of God's Son, was a huge hit amongst our friends, where we got to not only learn more about God, but we got to have a whole lot of fun in the process. School holidays were a time where Dad would share kids ministry in church. These messages were always so creative and special and meaningful and memorable, not only for the kids, but for the adults as well. Dad always affirmed me quietly with his words. He taught me to always try to beat Richard, meaning that I must always give of my very best and not to belittle myself by comparing myself to others. He taught me to always go the extra mile, never do the minimum required. He taught me to truly value people, to place others ahead of myself, to always try and be more interested in others, because that is when you find out how they're really doing. These were things that he didn't just tell me to do. I had an example to follow. I saw in his action every day. Even his passing enabled connections with long-lost friends to be made, with real conversations to be had, that really reassures us that not all is lost, but God is starting a new work in all of us. We have often chatted about the people side of things that I do in my job. He passed on his creativity to me in this area, and we have found all sorts of ways to connect to the heart of people, whether as an activity with an underlying message or a way to draw an audience in when speaking. Mum and Dad never forced their hand with us in terms of a career or finding a life partner, but what they did do was pray without ceasing for all of us, and probably for some of you at some point as well. Their love for each other was a fantastic example for all of us. God has always been in the details, and it has always gone before us. We always enjoyed seeing how God answered our prayers when a plan came together and we got to celebrate together. Dad had an incredible sense of humor and was never afraid to get the ball rolling by laughing at his own jokes. His laugh was so contagious, and we had so many moments when we were in hysterics that we couldn't see out of our eyes, and our sides were stiff the next day from exercising our laughing muscles. His sense of humor always made him so lovable, and we always saw this with his grandchildren, who loved him to bits. There were always hugs, tickles, leg squeezes from the front seat to let us know that we were loved and that we are loved. He is there for us, and he is there for us. Saying goodbye was hard, but your legacy will always be in sight. So we all keep waving. Love you, Dad.
My dad. It is so hard to believe that I'm putting pen to paper to pay tribute to your life when just over a month ago we were sipping tea on your veranda in the sun. Dad, Daddo, Daddicles, Pops, Popsicles, and the infamous Bobo. My extraordinary dad. Today I choose to celebrate you, even though my heart is hurting and I wish this didn't have to be goodbye. So, I celebrate the very special connection we shared. That smile across the room, the jokes that were sometimes funny to only the two of us, and the jokes that tickled your sense of humor until you were crying with laughter. When we were younger and you were in the ministry, these times of laughter signaled to us that you were unwinding on holiday, and those were so comforting to us. I celebrate that you loved detail. You noticed details that mattered and made people feel important. You made such an effort to call people by their names. You added simple detail to make people feel important, such as the flower picked from the garden next to my bed or on our kitchen counter. You noticed when someone could potentially be feeling left out, and you widened the space to include them. I celebrate the unwavering backing you showed me and so many others. You have always been interested in our life's work and the individuals impacted. You would remember things I'd spoken about for work, and you would return in conversation back to follow up on how they had unfolded. You believed in me, Dad. You truly believed that I had what it takes. And I'm most grateful for the prayer backing that you and Mom gave us every single morning. I celebrate your gift of encouragement. The number of times you would tell me, "You can do it, Ellie," or "You're doing so well." You have no idea how these kept me going. Even just your company was encouraging for me on long maternity leave days or driving in the car with me to a meeting. I celebrate your singing. How I loved to sing with you, Dad, harmonizing where we could, playing the music on full volume in the car, worshiping the Lord together. You loved music. I'll always treasure how you still managed to sing along with me in a whisper to turn your eyes upon Jesus just 4 days before you passed away. How we laughed about your inability to play certain chords on your mandolin, so at those times you would just sing extra loudly. I celebrate your love for Mum. Dad, when the Parkinsons left you so dependent on Mum, you still found ways to love your Pammy, your lifelong partner. You were her number one cheerleader, and she was and still is so radiant because of the love you poured out to her. I celebrate my childhood dad. Garden cricket, carpet bowls down the passage at 19 Seeking Drive, digging up old Soaky, the soak pit, your egg trick, being the clown at our parties and giving wheelbarrow rides, episodes of the game Blind Lion, where I got to be your little lion cub, walk, jog, sprints, reading poetry together from our English teaching books, the days of the dossier breaking down everywhere, the power walks and chats we'd have in my teenage years. I remember telling you that you were crazy when you suggested we start praying for my future husband, and I was only 12. Dad, I now see you understood how important it was going to be for me to marry the right person, and how blessed am I, 15 years married to my amazing Chriso, the fruit of your praise, my dad. I celebrate your legacy. You played a role in so many of my friends' lives, from Friday Frogs nights, where so many seeds were sown, to marrying so many of them and dedicating their children. You touched hearts at the Woodgrove Frail Care Centre, in the Cornwallis Chapel, and in all the churches and weddings you played a role in. You touched the heart of our domestic worker, Sylvia, and her family, whom you cared so deeply about. I celebrate your two most used words, God willing. You taught me to bring my plans before the Lord to be directed into His will. You taught me how to pursue God's will for my life and how to trust Him when I'm in His will but can't see what the future holds. You continually pointed us children back to God and His word through all our different seasons of life. I celebrate your treats, Ultramalt custard, Rolo chocolates, Milo, whole nut chocolate, custard slices, hospital jelly and custard, a bowl of cornflakes just before bed. Dad, now you are celebrating with Jesus in heaven, and probably still greeting long-lost friends and family by name. As Katie, my daughter, said, when Bobo gets to heaven, he'll be able to speak properly again. I know this was a hard pill to swallow with the Parkinsons, and it frustrated you on so many levels, but I want you to know that your voice will forever live on in my heart. Your saved voice notes on my phone are treasure. Thank you for being my dad and for giving me so many reasons to celebrate today. I'm not okay with saying goodbye to you, but I am at peace with where you are now And by celebrating you, there is a supernatural courage that gives me hope. And I will keep celebrating you, Dad, until we meet again.
A tribute for my dad. Putting these words on paper has probably been one of the hardest things I've had to do. Where do I start to capture the essence of the most wonderful man who I was privileged to call my dad? I want to start with a scripture from Matthew 25, verses 29, which reads, "To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance." My dad used well the 70 years of life that he was given. He had an abundant life. Although some may say, but what about Parkinson's disease that he suffered with for the past 12 years? But let me tell you, he was abundantly blessed, and he never took it for granted. Not only did the Lord abundantly bless him with 3 sisters and their subsequent partners and families, but with my dear mum, his lifetime partner. Us, his 4 children, whom he loved unconditionally, our subsequent partners, and his 11 grandchildren, as well as all of his friends who reach right around the world, and our most incredible Graaff-Reinet community, and now our wonderful Hilton community. I'd like to share some of the many ways that he used well what he was given. He had a real gift with people. My dad loved. He loved from his very core. He really loved. He loved people from all walks of life and race and background and culture, and those with means and those without. He had a way of making people feel so very special. He accepted people for who they were without an agenda. He loved them with a love tank that God kept topping up, and his tank overflowed. He had a real gift too with spoken words. And in the almost 60 years that he was able to use his voice, he used his words to affirm and love, bless, encourage, spur on, disciple, comfort, inspire, and to cheerlead, and to make people laugh. He would preach from his heart, and he would teach us so very well. He would pray confidently and with passion. He loved to celebrate the good and the true and the beautiful, significant milestones in all of our lives with a loud 3 cheers for. And then in the years following his Parkinson's diagnosis, when he progressively lost his ability to speak, even without his spoken words, just his presence was enough to reassure you that you mattered, that you were important and you were loved. He listened with both his heart and his ears, and he felt deeply for people's need. Many who knew him will know this well and appreciate how his quiet presence and kind eyes invited you to share your story and feel special. He never fought for the limelight, but he set you up on center stage to be loved and heard. How I will treasure the most recent voice notes that he sent with his softly spoken, carefully chosen words and his great courage to communicate what was in his heart. My dad had a real gift with written words too, and wrote many, many handwritten letters, notes, and cards with heartfelt and sincere words, and always found the best way to describe things. And the power of his written words has resulted in many people feeling loved and thanked sincerely or encouraged. Many of you listening will have been recipients of these beautifully crafted, handwritten letters, or in more recent years, a timely email or a heartfelt SMS, usually typed all in uppercase, although he did improve with WhatsApp more recently. Each of these opportunities when he wrote, he would pray about and then use his gift well. Together with my mum, he even wrote and published a book called Boys of Hilton, and 2 children's devotional books too, only one of which was published, but all of which have blessed and will continue to bless all those who read their words. My dad had an incredible gift with art and a real appreciation of all things beautiful. He saw the details of things that many of us will miss in our busy lives. He captured ideas and feelings, memories, and unique details in the art that he loved to make. His art studio, which was upstairs in their loft, I referred to as up in the clouds, because somehow he always seemed to be up there. I have wonderful memories of years and years and years of him painting and painting and painting, sometimes 3 or 4 versions of a masterpiece before he was satisfied with his product. Or of him doing the opposite, called cropalot.com, as we teased him regularly, whereby he'd just make the picture smaller and smaller until eventually he'd leave it or turn it into a card. He loved the movement and the fluidity of watercolor and never ceased to experiment with this medium. He never painted subject matter just for the sake of it. His art was always inspired by people and their stories, holidays, landscapes that he saw, flowers he loved, colors that captivated his imagination, people's personal homes or special places, Hilton College, which had a special spot in his heart, and animals that our children all loved. He did a number of commissioned pieces for people, and these were always celebrated when received. Most of his art he gave away, and we encouraged him in recent years to try and sell it, although he did express many times he didn't think it was good enough. Many of us are so blessed to have his art in our homes and on our walls, and this gift of art my dad used well. The abundance is what we'll all continue to enjoy as we cherish it. How fitting it is that my friend Sheila has painted this beautiful painting entitled Welcome Home, which she finished on the morning that he died, which depicts the most wonderful hug that we believe my dad would have received from Jesus on the morning of the 28th of December when he left us for his new heavenly home. My dad used his gift of music well too. He loved listening to beautiful music, making music on his mandolin, and worshiping with other believers in church or in smaller groups in their homes. He loved singing in the car, singing on holiday, and would sing with my mum regularly. Music filled his life, and there was hardly ever a time when there was no music playing at home. His taste in music varied widely, and he had a beautiful voice. The rich tones of his voice would swell any occasion, and he would harmonize so naturally. Even when he was unable to speak, he was able to sing, and this strengthened not only his heart, but those around him too. Just now, you will have the opportunity to listen to a number of his favorite worship songs during the slideshow of his life. But I would like to read the lyrics of one of his favorite songs by Graham Kendrick called Lord, You've Been Good to Me. Lord, you've been good to me all my life, all my life. Your loving kindness never fails. I will remember all you have done and bring from my heart thanksgiving songs. New every morning is your love, filled with compassion from above. Grace and forgiveness full and free. Lord, you've been good to me. So may each breath I take be for you, Lord, only you, giving you back the life I owe. Love so amazing and mercy so free. Lord, you've been good, so good to me. My dad loved and used poetry too, and was deeply inspired by many poems. My boys and I have had the immense privilege of him joining us regularly for a poetry tea as part of our homeschooling journey, whereby we'd each prepare a poem, which we'd then share over a special Friday tea time. My dad would spend many hours making his selection of poem, and his poems were always the richest, the most thought-provoking, and the most memorable. He treasured his collection of poetry books, which remain next to his bed. My dad loved good food and was always eager to share it, especially anything custard. Ultramel was a staple in his home, and my dad loved to make a jug of custard, which would often be so thick that the spoon would stand to attention in the middle. Custard slices were a firm favorite, and many of his closest friends will remember the many supper rugby matches that they'd watch on TV, which were followed by jelly and custard. He enjoyed baking cappuccino muffins regularly, and his lunch creations were sometimes very interesting. Lasagna, cornflakes, bacon, cook sisters, and homemade jam we'll always eat with fond memories of my dad. My dad had an incredible gift of giving. He always gave generously and often well beyond his means. He was a need meter and would go to great lengths to help others. I'm deeply inspired and moved when I consider the lengths he went to be compassionate and generous. The Bible talks about clothing ourselves with compassion, and he wore that clothing every day. He gave of his money, his time, his energy, often to his detriment, and his heart. He loved to just quietly get on with the business of giving, so that his left hand didn't even know what his right hand was doing, so to speak. My dad fathered us so very well. He never placed church above family. And as children, we were always a priority. We were always loved and encouraged. My dad loved us in all the 5 love languages. He spent much quality time with us, often juggling ministry around our commitments. He served us. I remember in matric being woken up with Milo and toast with honey when I was so tired and struggling to keep going. He gave us gifts that blessed us that we loved. We were the lucky recipients of so many warm hugs, leg squeezes, and winks across the room. And his best way of loving us was his many words of loving affirmation, which was his love language too, and we relished all of his affirming words. He was a father to many more than just us 4 kids, and we lovingly prioritized these many people who too sheltered under his fatherly reach. We mourn with all those who identify with this, as we know his heart was for you too. My dad had a gift for creating fun. He loved to have fun. He always had ideas up his sleeve and would never cease to amaze us when he pulled one out. He was adventurous in spirit and so enthusiastic when he got an idea in his head. Youth evenings as a teenager in church were always a blast with him, and he was a pirate on church camp, taking all the children to look for treasure. One year, he strung up sheets, tied together into the rafters of the church, and filled them with masses of balloons. On the count of 3, he pulled a pulley that he'd rigged up, and all of us were showered with colorful balloons. Another year at Christmas time, he chose the word surprise as the theme of the service, and even passed around the offering bag, inviting everyone to take out a chocolate. He invented himself as Milo the Clown at all of our birthday parties as young children, and would sneeze into a tissue filled with powder, making clouds of white engulf us all. As far back as I can remember, he relished a hike, a camping holiday, fishing, swimming, and was the master of invented games. He even did a polar bear swim with me and Nikki Tyler in midwinter in the Berg, and he loved to laugh. He'd always be the first to laugh at his crazy ideas or silliness. My dad had a real love for preparing young couples who were preparing for marriage. He ended up marrying almost all of my friends. He married hundreds of couples and strongly believed in the value of pre-marriage counseling. His beautiful relationship with my mum is testament to the yards that he put in to make a successful marriage of his own, and he loved my mum fiercely and tenderly. Last and most importantly of all, he loved Father God. My dad found Jesus as his Savior when he was 19 and faithfully served him all his days thereafter. My dad was a humble, gentle man with the harnessed strength of a broken-in horse, knowing full well how much he needed to depend on God for everything. He was a worshiper and cried so easily in the last few years of his life as his softened heart would break for what breaks God's heart. He took any opportunity to speak truth into my 3 boys' lives and always humbly explained things of faith. I will always treasure the lockdown church at home Sundays we shared with him and my mum because they live with us. And Dad would share stories from his life and play the box drum eagerly and pray passionately with us. Those Sundays are some I will never forget. My dad loved discipling people in their faith, teaching them about Jesus and walking with them. He mentored so many and has influenced countless people's journeys. He was always so thankful for what God had done in his own life. And for many years, every evening, him and Mum would list 10 new things that they were thankful to God for. My dad had an authentic faith, a real, raw, unfiltered relationship with God. He loved to celebrate with anyone who surrendered their life to Jesus. He had the wonderful idea that when someone gave their life to Jesus, that the following Sunday, there would be a chocolate cake just for them to enjoy after church with everyone. And we celebrated many times. So today, I want to do what he'd have wanted and put myself out there. If your heart is stirred during the memorial service by the God who my dad loved so passionately and gave his life for, and you want to give your heart to Jesus and turn the course of your life around to follow him, then I would love to hear about this decision. And this chocolate cake will be for you. Please let me know if that is you. Dad, you used well the many gifts that God gave you, and we are overwhelmed by the abundance of the legacy that you leave behind. I will always love you. I will try to remember not to rush. I will love and honor Doug as you always encouraged me to. I'm looking after Mum, and the dogs are getting an extra share of affection in your absence. Till I see you again, my dad. Enjoy worshiping in heaven.